Today, some of the most famous Chinese dishes in America were never eaten in China. General Tso's chicken, chop suey, crab Rangoon, egg foo young. For generations of Americans, these dishes defined Chinese food. But their story didn't begin in imperial kitchens in Beijing. It began in immigrant kitchens across the United States, and the story starts more than 2 centuries ago. In 1785, 4 Chinese sailors arrived in the port of Baltimore, Maryland, aboard an American trading ship called the Palace. They had been recruited by a merchant named O'Donnell. As far as historical records show, this was the earliest documented presence of Chinese people on American soil. They left almost no trace. But the story that followed them, of migration, labor, adaptation, and food, would quietly reshape the American table. By the early 1850s, another wave of travelers was crossing the Pacific. Gold had been discovered in California. Tens of thousands of Cantonese laborers arrived in what they called Gamsan, Gold Mountain. They came poor. They came with little more than hope. But they brought something important with them: their cooking. Many of these men would later help build the Transcontinental Railroad, an engineering achievement so impressive that Scientific American called it one of the modern world's great wonders. Along the railroad lines, in temporary camps and makeshift kitchens, Chinese cooks began preparing familiar food with unfamiliar ingredients. They had to adapt. Ingredients were different, customers were different, expectations were different. And slowly something new began to appear on American tables. Not Chinese food, but Chinese-American food. A cuisine created through necessity, creativity, and survival. Egg foo young in southern China, particularly in Guangdong's Pearl River Delta, Cantonese chefs had long mastered a delicate egg dish known as furong dan, literally hibiscus egg. The name referred to its appearance. When cooked properly, the omelette bloomed outward like the petals of a flower. Inside were ingredients like roasted pork, shrimp, mushrooms, and bean sprouts. The dish was finished with a light, clear sauce that coated the surface without overwhelming it. By the late Qing dynasty, the dish had even been recorded in a Cantonese culinary text compiled around 1890 called Recipes Worth Searching For. In Cantonese cooking, the technique became foundational. Hibiscus pork, hibiscus crab, hibiscus shrimp. Egg was used to preserve texture, hold ingredients together, and add fragrance. But what arrived in America looked very different. The earliest Chinese cooks in California were not trying to introduce classical cuisine. They were trying to survive. And survival in 19th century America meant cooking food Americans would actually recognize and order. The elegant presentation disappeared. So did the delicate sauce. In its place appeared something simpler, a pan-fried egg patty, golden on the outside and soft in the center. Inside were onions, mushrooms, and chicken. On top, a ladle of thick brown gravy. Familiar enough to feel safe. Chinese enough to feel exotic. Egg foo young spread quickly through Chinatown restaurants. It was cheap, it was filling, and it could be cooked in minutes. During the Great Depression, those qualities made it a staple, but its most dramatic rise came after December 7th, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor transformed American attitudes overnight. Japanese restaurants suddenly lost customers. Chinese restaurants filled the gap. Egg foo young, already established and affordable, became one of the most recognizable Chinese dishes in America. By the post-war years, it was commonly paired with fried rice, forming the classic American takeout combination. And yet older Chinese-American cooks sometimes watched this popularity with quiet amusement. Many diners believed they were tasting an ancient Chinese delicacy. What they were eating was, in reality, a carefully adapted fried egg, a dish redesigned to make a foreign cuisine feel familiar. In 1896, one of the most powerful men in China arrived in New York City. His name was Li Hongzhang. Western newspapers called him the Bismarck of the East. He had commanded armies, negotiated treaties, and helped build China's first modern navy. His visit to the United States attracted enormous attention. And somewhere in that attention, a story appeared. According to the legend, Li Hongzhang visited a Chinese restaurant in New York and enjoyed a dish of stir-fried meat and vegetables. Restaurant owners quickly placed a new item on their menus, Li Hongzhang chop suey. The story spread rapidly through newspapers. The only problem? It probably never happened. Food historian Rangoon Yu searched extensively for evidence and found none. Another scholar, Andrew Coe, notes that chop suey had already appeared in American newspapers more than a decade earlier. The Brooklyn Eagle was already writing about it in 1884. Li Hongzhang likely had nothing to do with it, but his visit created something valuable: public curiosity about China. Restaurant owners simply attached his name to a dish already on their menus. The name chop suey itself comes from Cantonese zap sui. It literally means miscellaneous scraps. The earliest versions used inexpensive ingredients available to Cantonese laborers: organ meats, bean sprouts, celery, and bamboo shoots. Over time, Chinese-American cooks modified the recipe. Offal was replaced with familiar meats. Sauces were thickened. Portions became larger. It was never refined cuisine. But once the legend of Li Hongzhang became attached to it, something interesting happened. Middle-class Americans felt invited to try it. Chop suey restaurants appeared in New York, Chicago, Boston, and beyond. By the early 20th century, eating chop suey after work had become a common social habit. After World War II, its mixture of vegetables and meat even seemed healthy. Canned versions appeared in supermarkets. Served over noodles, some Americans even began calling it Chinese spaghetti. Chop suey's success was never really about the dish itself. It was about the story people believed about it. By the early 2000s, delivery platform Grubhub reported that two dishes dominated Chinese takeout orders across the United States: General Tso's chicken and crab Rangoon. Together, they represent the final stage of Chinese-American cuisine. The dish is named after Zuo Zongtang, a 19th century military general from Hunan province. He suppressed the Taiping Rebellion and became one of the most important figures of late Qing history. He never tasted the dish named after him. That dish was created by a chef named Peng Changkui. Peng was born in 1919 in Hunan. By the 1940s, he had become a banquet chef for the Chinese nationalist government. When the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, he fled with the nationalists to Taiwan. In 1953, Peng was preparing a diplomatic banquet for visiting American Admiral Arthur W. Radford. After several days of cooking, he needed something new, so he improvised. He deboned chicken thigh, fried it crisp, and coated it in a sauce inspired by Hunan flavors: salty, sour, and hot. He named the dish after his hometown hero, General Zuo Zongtang. 20 years later, in 1973, Peng moved to New York City and opened a restaurant near the United Nations. General Tso's chicken appeared on the menu. But something strange had happened. American diners were already eating it. Other chefs had visited Peng's restaurant in Taiwan and adapted the recipe. The version now popular in the United States was much sweeter, heavily battered, and completely transformed. The creator had been beaten to his own invention. Peng adapted again. The sauce grew sweeter, the batter thicker. By the 1980s and 1990s, General Tso's chicken had spread across the country. From Manhattan to Montana, it appeared on nearly every Chinese takeout menu. Meanwhile, the original version, sour, hot, and barely sweet, quietly disappeared. Years later, a filmmaker showed Peng photographs of the American version. The glistening sauce, the thick fried batter. Peng looked at the images and said simply, "Nonsense. Crab Rangoon makes no claim to Chinese tradition." And it never did. The dish first appeared in 1950 at Trader Vic's, a tiki bar restaurant in Oakland, California. The owner wanted something exotic to serve with cocktails. He called it Rangoon crab. The name referred to Rangoon, the colonial-era name for Yangon, the capital of Myanmar. The connection was purely decorative. The recipe was equally imaginative. Imitation crab meat, cream cheese, garlic powder, a one sauce, all wrapped inside a wonton wrapper and deep fried, served with sweet and sour sauce. It was a fantasy, Chinese in appearance, entirely American in flavor. But Chinese restaurant owners quickly recognized the opportunity. The wonton wrapper gave the dish just enough legitimacy to place it on Chinese menus. The cream cheese filling ensured customers would love it. Crab Rangoon spread across the country. In many places, it even became more popular than traditional Chinese dishes. A dish with no Chinese heritage at all, that somehow became a Chinese restaurant classic. Across all these dishes, one pattern appears again and again. The most successful Chinese-American dishes were rarely the most authentic. They were the most legible. They spoke a culinary language American diners could understand, just unfamiliar enough to feel exciting, just familiar enough to feel safe. Some historians see this as compromise. Others see it as creativity. But from the perspective of food itself, the answer may be simpler. When food crosses oceans, it does not survive by staying the same. It survives by changing. And sometimes, those changes create something entirely new. If this episode changed how you see the past, hit like and subscribe. Food Tales drops a new story every week, and the next one is already cooking.